Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Between You and Me. It is Alex here again, and today we are doing a solo episode. I don't have a lot of updates for you guys today. It's a beautiful sunny day. Now you can finally see my tan in the camera. If you guys are listening, we are posting all episodes on YouTube at Between You and Me Pod. So you guys can watch them there if you'd like. If not, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate the podcast and follow it. And also the Instagram at Between You and Me Podcast. Other than that, we have no updates. Like I said, life is going good. It's a beautiful sunny day and we have a very juicy episode in store. When I came up with talking about this topic, I was doing a lot of scrolling, and for some reason I always end up on like relationship TikTok, which makes sense. Maybe I'm interacting with a lot of that content, but I am in a relationship, so I do tend to like sit when they have long talking videos and like listen to them because, you know, I'm not one to take advice from TikTok all the time, but I'm not gonna lie to you, sometimes people have some good information on there. So I sit and I listen and I learn sometimes, and then I go and look stuff up myself to fact check. That doesn't happen often, but this time around I did fact check some information. I learned about the 4 Horsemen, which are communication styles that can predict the end of relationships. Now, depending on what I title this episode, that probably sounds a little daunting and probably sounds a bit scary, because I know if you have any level of relationship anxiety, that might really spook you. I myself have suffered with a lot of anxiety around relationships at times in my life when I have been much more anxious, and it has caused a big burden for me. And I had times in my life where I've gone to podcast episodes and I'm like, oh my God, like, how do I know if I'm in a good relationship? How can I prevent any bad things from happening in my relationship? Blah, 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 blah. And, you know, that just comes from the simple fact that anxiety works in a way where it tries to find all the problems that are going on in your life and fix them or prevent them from happening. So I end up listening to things like this, for example, which are like examples of bad things in relationships, how you can fix them, yada, yada, yada. But today I want to speak about this in a way that is to give you guys awareness to the fact that sometimes we can be very unconscious, we can be a little careless, and we don't necessarily realize that we're behaving in certain ways that are going to harm our relationships. I'm sure any of you guys that have been in relationships, have observed other people's relationships, or are currently in relationships understand that they can be very challenging at times. It's very easy to have conflict between two people, especially two people who have such a close relationship. In the same breath, it's like sometimes we don't think before we act off of emotion, we don't necessarily take into account the other person's feelings all the time, and we can begin to fall into these patterns that end up really hurting the relationship. So the 4 Horsemen are 4 different ways that your communication style during conflict can seriously harm your relationship. The reason why it says it can predict the end of a relationship is because based on statistics, these 4 things have a 90% chance of ending your relationship if they continue. What I'm going to be talking to you guys about today are these 4 things. I'm going to explain them, give you guys examples, and then of course, I hate to leave you guys with no answers, no solutions. So of course, I'm going to give you guys ways to solve these issues in your relationship. There would be no use of saying these things, apart from bringing awareness, if I didn't do that. So I'm going to give you guys the solutions after I speak about each one of them, but I do think that this is a very important topic. I think that I'm guilty of, at times, using these communication styles, and I'm sure like any of you guys listening to this, if you clicked on this because you are worried about your relationship, you value it and you want to do better and you want to be a better person. I think it is really important that when you're in a relationship, you strive to be a better version of you, and just the same way you would if you were single, hopefully, right? So we're going to get into it. I'm going to talk to you guys about these 4 horsemen. And I do want to preface by saying that if you do find that you do these things within your relationship, like I said, I'm giving you guys solutions. I'm giving you guys ways that you can fix this, but don't take it in the sense that you're a bad person. Don't take it in the sense that I'm saying that you can't be fixed, for example. Like, I will throw my hands up and be the first one to say that I am guilty of doing these things at times in previous relationships, in current relationships, with my friends, my family, anyone, not even just my partner. So it's like, these things are not end all be all red flags for the rest of your life. It just means that you have areas to improve on. And if you're here, that means you care enough to improve them. So good on you. Keep in mind that unhealthy patterns are learned, so they can be unlearned as well. And if this is something that you think that's been going on for a long time, if you're in a relationship that's followed these negative communication styles for years, let's say, you need to also understand that there are times where things cannot be fixed. And this only is the case if neither party tries. If the other party has stopped putting in any and all effort into the relationship, I do want to make that little disclaimer that you can't hold up the relationship by yourself. You need to have that level of support and that level of effort from the other person. If it feels as though you're in it by yourself, you listen to this whole episode and realize you don't do any of those things, only your partner does, that's a really challenging position to be in. My solution for that would be to really reflect on how much you're gaining, and if you believe that you harbor none of these negative things and you don't need to improve on any of these things and only your partner does, but they are not doing it, then we could be in a situation that's a little bit toxic. And I don't want to speak about all these different communication styles and how to change them when you're the one always suffering, if that makes sense. I just wanted to disclaim, because there are situations where these communication styles can be really can be accompanied with anger or aggression or whatever it is. And if you're experiencing that constantly, it's just not a healthy relationship. There's a fine line between when it starts to become emotionally abusive and when it's things that can be repaired and can be fixed and you can move through with a partner. Keep in mind that means that two people are on the same page, they're working together, they're choosing each other, and they're wanting to get better. Mistakes are inevitable. But if this is a continuous pattern and only your partner is doing this to you, you need to reflect on that. You need to figure out what's best for you moving forward. Okay, cool. Now, let's get into this. These are what I'd like to say warning signs for a relationship that is going down the wrong path. Like I said, it's never too late to fix it if you have two people who are willing to do that. The first communication style that can predict the end of a relationship is called stonewalling. This is when someone completely ignores the other person during any kind of conflict. It's when someone takes themselves out of the situation. When they ignore the other person, they can end up making the other person feel like whatever they're saying is stupid, it's not valid, it's not important. They don't answer your texts or calls when you're in this conflict. If you're having an argument right in front of that person, an example of that would be them just getting up and leaving. They don't even want to try to be a part of it. If they're dismissing your ideas and your perspectives and the way that you feel within any kind of argument, making it belittled and not something that's important, that is also an example of stonewalling. Acting like the conflict at hand is not even serious or important is also an example of that. And essentially it is ignoring, pushing away, and not investing yourself in solving whatever problem is at hand. So obviously, when you listen to it in this way, the reason people do this is because they're extremely overwhelmed. There's levels to this where it's not harmful and levels where it is. The ways that I've just described, where you're fully ignoring the other person, let's say someone comes up to you with an issue, something that they find kind of hurtful that you did, and now you are dismissing them. You're telling them that that's not important. You're saying, okay, well, why does that matter? Why are you even upset at that? It's not important whatsoever. And then you take yourself out of the situation. You leave the room. You stop answering their texts, their calls. This can be really challenging in a relationship because one person's overwhelmed with their emotions and the other person is only trying to connect with you in order to be able to solve whatever problem is at hand. I think that when you are stonewalling in a relationship, there is a level of emotion that you have not yet grasped. You have not yet allowed yourself to navigate fully. It could be anything. It could be anger. It could be jealousy. It could be anxiety. Any of these intense emotions that you're feeling in the moment cause you to completely pull yourself out of the situation because you have not yet understood how to healthily move through that emotion while also communicating with your partner. Now, that's not the bad thing. If you don't know how to do these things, that's not the issue at hand. That's something that you can work on and your partner should be able to give you patience with. The problem is how you choose to react in those situations. If you belittle the other person and make them feel like their emotions are not important or whatever they brought up is not important, if you completely, like I said, remove yourself from the situation and leave them feeling isolated, alone, like they can't connect with you in those moments. This is going to be so harmful to your relationship because in any situation where there is conflict, the other person is always going to fear you leaving, whether that be emotionally, mentally, or actually physically. I've been in the position of being the other person, but I've also been in the position of cutting off the conversation, being like, nope, I don't want to talk about this, because in that moment, I couldn't handle the emotion. When you are the other party and you're constantly being left, it becomes so damaging, truly. So if this gives you any amount of empathy, you should understand that that form of communication is never the way to go. Now, how you should handle this, how you should handle the overload of emotion when it comes to any type of conflict, is to clearly communicate that you need space away from the problem. What I have done myself when I have been in these situations is I've literally said, can you please give me X amount of time to just breathe? Like, I just need to not be overwhelmed. I think even if you're not a person that gets overwhelmed easily, taking a break can sometimes be really helpful because it allows you to gather your thoughts. It allows you to ground yourself. You're able to get back to a place where you're in a more neutral emotional level, and it can only benefit you, I personally believe, if you do it the right way. I think that if you are choosing to take a break within a conflict, you always have to come back with the time frame that you want to continue the conversation. I think if you say, hi, please, can I take a little break, and you don't give them any time frame of how long that break is going to be, I think it's probably just as bad as stonewalling, because although you are doing better and you're communicating it, you're not giving them the reassurance that probably a lot of people need, that you're going to come back and solve whatever problem is at hand. So make sure that you're coming back with a time frame that you can say, okay, I need 20 minutes. Okay, I need an hour, whatever it might be. And I'm going to just calm down, breathe it out, like figure out my thoughts so I can respectfully communicate them to you and I can hear you out as well, because that's what people deserve, especially when it comes to conflicts. So I think that whenever you are super emotional in conflict and having issues when it comes to that, you're already in a losing battle, because if two people are high in emotion, who knows what they're going to say to each other? Who knows how they're going to choose to react to whatever problem's happening? There could be an escalation. There could be, people walking out, people screaming, people yelling, and like nobody ever wants to be in that situation. Trust me. Like it's never the overall goal to argue and yell at your partner and then have to repair that versus taking a break and then being able to repair something a lot more calm. I think this might be, I could be wrong, but I think this might be one of the easier things to repair because it takes one simple action to be able to take that break and then come back and figure out whatever it is the problem was and be able to resolve it really peacefully and calmly. A lot of people are not super comfortable with space, so this is definitely something that you're going to need to communicate with your partner. Hopefully, maybe even in a situation where you guys are both calm and there's no argument at hand, you can bring it up and be like, hey, if we ever have any problems in the future and they start to get really heated, like, are you okay if we ask each other for breaks? Are you okay if we ask for 10 minutes, 15, an hour tops, so that we can ground ourselves, get back to a normal state, and then speak about it? Is that something you'd be like cool with doing? Instead of in that moment being like, hey, I need an hour, like I don't want to talk about this right now, can we please come back to it later? And then they start to freak out a little bit potentially. And they're like, wait, why do you need space from me? Like what's going on? Like da 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 da. Especially if you have reacted with stonewalling in the past and this is an ongoing issue and pattern, they're going to be very thrown off by the fact that now you are just communicating the stonewalling and you're not just doing it without any say. So yeah, I think that could be a good tactic. If you are the one experiencing the stonewalling by someone else, once again, I think my answer for this over and over again is going to be that you should really keep in mind if you are never doing that to them and you are never doing anything bad to them, let's say, and they are continuously doing something like this to you, you need to recognize when it becomes a very toxic situation. If it's something that you maybe evenly do to each other, your partner does to you and you do to them sometimes, then it's something that you can collaboratively talk about and give them literally what I said as the example of how to fix it and work with it together. Our next one of the 4 horsemen is contempt. Contempt is thinking that someone is better than their partner and ridiculing them and having an overall lack of respect. So this can be, for example, when you always continuously throw sarcasm at your partner, you're speaking about them in a negative way, whether it's to their face or to other people. It's an overall lack of respect towards them. And it can also be seen when you are continuously competing with them in a really intense way. I think playful competitiveness is not bad at all. Continuous criticism and correction over any kind of discussion. Not only can contempt be harmful to your relationship because it makes the other person feel like they're constantly being belittled and they're not good enough, but it can also be really fucking annoying. If you are in a relationship where whatever you say, whatever you do, literally however you act, the other person can find a reason to belittle you and say oh, but are you even good at that? Oh, do you even understand that? Can you actually do this? And they don't have any faith in you. They can't see you succeed in any way. You want a partner in life who is going to be rooting for you. And you want to be that partner as well. You want to give your partner the benefit of the doubt. You want to think that they're capable of doing things, of meeting their goals, of, even doing small things in their day-to-day life. You don't want to think so little of them. Sometimes it becomes a pattern to be treating someone with contempt because, you've gotten into this banter sometimes where you're always speaking badly to each other. Constant ridicule in a relationship is never nice. It never feels good. And I sometimes feel like contempt normally goes both ways. When it's only one person doing that to the other person will probably end up resenting them or following the same actions and criticizing them back. So if you feel like sometimes you are treating your partner with this type of disrespect, and maybe your intention isn't terrible, maybe this is just the way that you have learned to communicate in the past, we are going to unlearn that. Because once again, this is a 90% chance that you will ruin your relationship if you do this. So I would suggest that you don't. But in order to fix it, you need to change your perspective to something that is more directed to appreciation and to respect. Obviously, one of the most important things I believe in a relationship is respect. I think always identifying and communicating what you actually value in each other is really important. Switching your perspective entirely to a more positive one for the other person is important, because realistically, why are you with someone if you don't see the good in them? Sometimes you have to ask yourself that, because there are situations where people are in relationships and it's out of comfort and it's not out of love, appreciation, respect, and all the things that are required, I think, to have a healthy relationship. So over time, I think these things, this communication style specifically happens, and we tend to look past it, but then only realize it when we're unhappy. So yeah, definitely remind yourself. Like, sometimes you need a good reminder to show your respect to your partner first and foremost, and to always understand and validate the other person's experience and emotions. If you're continuously criticizing and correcting the other person and thinking maybe they're not smart enough, or they're not capable of doing something, then I think you need to work away from that and figure out a way to communicate something. If you're unsure if someone's capable of something, ask them questions, figure out their perspective, find out more about their point of view, learn more about them. If you're so sure they can't do something, how about you let them prove you wrong? I think contempt as a whole is believing that you're slightly better than someone else. And a good reminder to everyone is that you are two equals, you are two human beings, you are two imperfect people. So you are not better than your partner. And maybe you're better at spelling than them. Maybe you're better at swimming than them. You are not a better overall human being in every way, shape, and form than your partner. So take that out of your mind if it is there. If you're not even aware that you've been thinking that way, then there's a reminder. And think about different ways that you can show value and validate your partner. And if they have a different opinion to you, instead of criticizing them, ask them, oh, I didn't think of it this way. Can you explain that more to me? Learn more about your partner, like I said before. Only treat your partner with honor and respect, because that is the way that you would like them to treat you. Next one. This one, sometimes people get a little bit mixed up with when it comes to contempt, but is criticism. Criticism to the degree that you are constantly attacking your partner based on their character and their core intentions. There's a difference between criticism and critiquing someone. And I think criticism is very harmful when you're directing all of your negative attention to the person and not the problem. The problem with criticism is that you are not directly choosing to solve the problem that is happening. Instead, you are choosing to make your partner look worse than they actually are. In this way, you're actually harming your own beliefs and mentality too, because if your partner makes a mistake and you group that in with who they are as a person, then you're going to start to resent your partner. If they, hurt you in some way, shape, or form, but it was unintentional, it wasn't something that they meant to do, and now you're characterizing them as someone you can't rely on anymore because they acted in a way that they weren't aware would hurt you, and now you're coming for them in a way where it's like, okay, their whole entire character is at question, it can really harm the relationship. Criticism can also make the person being criticized feel very powerless because they're constantly feeling like they're making mistakes, but these mistakes aren't something that can easily be changed because they're being blamed on something that is about their core personality, about who they are as a person. Also, it's an extreme blame mentality, which I didn't even get to say. It is constantly finding something wrong with the other person. And something that you could say very often is, why do you always do this? Or why do you never do that? It's taking one problem and making it a whole thing based on their personality, right? So the way to fix this is to address the behavior at hand. Be very meticulous about the way that you bring up problems to your partner. If you have a situation where you are unhappy about something that your partner did, and if you find that, you're a person that criticizes very often, take a step back before bringing it up to your partner. Think to yourself, is this about who they are, or is this about a mistake that they've made? Address the problem in a sense of the mistake that they've made, the behavior that you have a problem with, and figure out how you can work together to stop this behavior from happening again in the future. Once again, this is something that there's a fine line between. I'm not saying these mistakes should be as dramatic as someone cheating on you, someone lying to you, someone being unfaithful, someone, whatever things that are like boundary crossing situations. I'm talking about, why doesn't your boyfriend put in the effort to speak to your friends or become friends with your friends? Let's say that's the first example that came to mind. But let's say they don't make the effort to communicate a lot with your friends. You want them to become closer with your friend group, something like that. And they don't make the effort to do that. They don't make the effort to come to any friend functions or whatever it is. If you come with a hostile energy of, why do you never do this? Why are you not a social person? Why can't you do this one thing for me? You never do anything for me. This is example of criticism. This is, completely ignoring any positive aspects about the relationship, any positive aspects about the person. And instead of addressing the problem at hand, you're addressing who they are as a person and putting them in kind of a box that they're not a social person, that they don't want to be friends with your friends, when in reality, the behavior could be that they were busy, or the behavior could be that they feel a bit uncomfortable, that they're a little shy, that they, don't want to put themselves in a situation where they're going to feel stressed out, whatever it might be, right? So you need to address this behavior without any blame or attack. A good way to do this is to use I statements, is to say, I feel like this because you did this. And don't go any further to say, and that makes you this type of person, or you are like this. Also, when it comes to the certain behavior changing, it's really helpful to make specific requests to say, can you do this instead? Sometimes you need to paint the picture. You need to say, this is what I didn't like, this is how it made me feel, and this is what I wish you could have done differently. Giving the person the literal formula to make you happy is sometimes not really what we want to do. We want people to read our minds, but it helps you. And if you can do anything to help you, your happiness and your relationship, you should do it. All right, moving on to last but not least, probably one of the most important ones in my opinion, is defensiveness. It probably is also the most common one as well. I think everyone, their moms, their uncles, their brothers or sisters are going to be defensive at least once in their life. For those of you that might not know, defensiveness is denying or deflecting any complaint to protect themselves from being negatively perceived. The defensiveness can be very, very toxic to a relationship when it is continuous and it is a cycle that doesn't stop. If you are a person who has never once taken accountability for anything you have done and have always put the blame on the other person, whether it be you who actually did do something wrong or you who didn't do anything wrong at all, you are in a negative spiral. There should be, at least once in your fucking life, that you've done something wrong that you take accountability for. And even in situations where you don't think you've done anything wrong, there's a chance that you probably have. I've been in a lot of situations where for the first like 15 minutes of a conversation or an argument, I'm like, wait, I literally didn't do anything wrong. What the fuck? And then when you allow the other person to speak, when you understand, when you hear them out, you're like, okay, I can see how they have perceived the situation and where I went wrong. So defensiveness can look like trying to correct the other person's perception or continuously giving an excuse for your behavior. If your first reaction is to say, oh, but I did this because blah, 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 then that's an example of defensiveness. Also, if you're continuously taking and shifting the blame onto the other person, that means you're not able to take accountability for anything that you did, and you want to center and focus on where the other person went wrong. If you are the type of person to bring up past issues, things that have already been solved, things that you've already gone through, and you're bringing them up as kind of ammunition within an argument where the other person's coming to you with something that you did wrong, and now you're saying, oh, but you did X, Y, and Z 5 years ago, then this is defensiveness. Gaslighting also, this word is such a fucking trigger, I swear to God, but I'll say it. Gaslighting is a clear example of defensiveness. It is telling somebody that the way that they feel, the way they perceive something, their emotions are not valid, they're not important, and they're not even worth talking about, truly. Defensiveness also really enforces this you versus me narrative. And if you've been on any form of relationship TikTok, you'll know that every quote, every piece of advice they give you is to address problems together. Address problems as you and me versus the problem, not you versus me. And when you are defensive, you're seeing someone's complaint as an attack towards you. Sometimes, we look at these situations and we think, oh my God, they think we're a bad person. And you know what? Sometimes people say it in certain ways that make you think that. But rather than being defensive, you can do things like ask questions. You can say, well, why do you feel this? What made you feel this way? I want to understand better. It's always more important to understand fully 100% where the other person's coming from if they're coming to you with a problem, and then answer. It's very easy for our gut instinct to be defensiveness because that is an element of our ego. We never want to look bad around the people we love. We never want, realistically, hopefully, the people that we love to feel bad. So if we ever make them feel bad or they show us how we made them feel bad, it's our gut instinct to deflect that, to say, no, I didn't mean it that way, or you took it in a weird way, or blah, blah, blah. Defensiveness is just the easiest recipe to not have to harbor any negative emotion about yourself. And the way that you can fix this is to fully own up to the ways that you have contributed to a problem. When I say fully, that means really communicating to your partner and being like, okay, no, I get it. The way that I did this is what bugged you. So how do you move forward? How do you fix it? How do you not continue this problem in the future? Because that's always the goal, right? When you're arguing is to not have the same argument. So focusing fully on your impact, and even if the other person made a mistake, guys, I think it's important to address where you went wrong first if that person brought up the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like if that person's coming to you and being like, I'm mad about this, then it's rightful for you to address where you went wrong before you go on to the other page and say, wait, but you did this. Because then it's going to be a back and forth cycle. One person wants to be heard, the other person wants to be heard, back and forth. So always address the problem at hand that was brought up initially, how you might have impacted that person, how you might have contributed to the problem. And when you are taking accountability for your part and owning your part, I believe it actually inspires the other person to own up to their part too. If it doesn't get to that negative and bitter place where no one wants to own up to their problems, which, by the way, you can use my first example and take a break and then come back to it. But if it doesn't get to that, then there's so much more of a positive impact that's built between you guys. When you have positive arguments, when you have positive conversations about issues, it brings people much closer. And a way to have that positivity is to be very open to owning your part. We're all going to go wrong in our lives. There's no point in holding on so hard to the fact that you want to be right. It is actually, as a matter of fact, a big fucking waste of time. So there we go. I thought that this episode was going to go by quicker, to be honest, because I only had 4 of these communication styles to explain, but it took a little bit of time. I'm a little tired now. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, once again, if it is you who is, participating in these negative communication styles, I hope today you were able to get a little bit of perspective to, understand how you can adjust little things that you do to be able to have a more positive relationship. I don't think anybody who genuinely cares about their partner, loves them, and sees a future with them wants to do any of these 4 things that has a 90% chance of ending your relationship. By the way, don't be afraid, because that statistic would have scared me if I was dealing with some anxiety right now, but that statistic is based on the continuous communication style, you constantly communicating in all these 4 horsemen ways, if that makes any sense at all. If you were to be using contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling all the time, there's a 90% chance that your relationship will end, which is fair enough, right? After hearing all of that, I'd be like, I don't want to be in that type of relationship either. But yeah, so that is it for today. I hope you guys got some information from that in order to keep in your mind bank for future arguments, future situations. If you've just listened to this, it might even be beneficial to send this to your partner and to be like, hey, I love you so much. Let's try our best to not do these things. It's not you, it's not me, it's both of us. We have to improve on things. We're both a little defensive at times. We're both, criticizing each other at times. So yeah, hopefully these little formulas on how to fix it will help you guys. And at the end of it all, I do believe that a lot of it comes from us not really quite knowing how to handle our emotions and how high our emotions can get, whether you're extremely annoyed, angry, upset, sad. We end up acting in ways that are really big and explosive and harmful. So when we've gotten a chance to get and gain control over our emotions and are very focused on how we react and reacting in a more positive way, then I think that overall helps. So an added bonus is gaining more emotional maturity will 100% benefit you. These things won't come as naturally as you to act in these negative ways. And yeah. That is all today, ladies. Thank you so much for listening. I love you guys. Like I said in the beginning, don't forget to rate the podcast if you have been liking this. We only have a couple more episodes left this season. I feel like it always goes by so fast. So I'd really appreciate if you guys did your best, shared this to as many people as you could, followed the Instagram, subscribed over on YouTube, and DM'd me. Any questions, any topics, anything you want to hear more of before the season ends. Okay, guys, love you so much, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.